Okay, so the tools you'll need is obviously your shelf of choice with your shelf brackets. You'll want to know which rating of shelf brackets you want, how heavy you want to go. They all have a weight rating. You need a stud finder. Zircon's a big one. I can't stand these things, so I don't use them at all. I actually just use a magnetic stud finder, and they're cheap, no batteries, super reliable. I've got a whole video on how to find a stud, so I won't go into any more on that. You need your hardware. You need screws to fix your brackets to the stud, and if you can't find a stud, or if it's not an ideal location, you can use, I use these drywall anchors. These things are terrific. I use these all the time, and I've had really good luck with them. They're way better than a toggle bolt, or especially the cheaper wall anchors. So you need a pencil, you need some sort of level, tape measure, and a screw gun. And this is an impact, and you could use a regular drill or just a good old screwdriver, but I don't like using either one of them. I love this impact driver. So, and then some sort of cleanup for a little bit of dust. So the first thing to do is begin with the end in mind. Kind of lay it out like you'd like. Find your studs in your wall. I put on blue tape so you can see my stud layout. Mine are on 24-inch centers. Luckily, I bet yours will be on 16-inch centers. This is a really old home in the attic. And also figure out what height you want it at and how much weight you'll be putting on it. That'll determine what weight and what size of brackets you'll need. And always try to hit studs if you can with your brackets. Sometimes you're not able to if you want it in a certain spot. Let's say you didn't want this so close to the corner. What you could do is you could put your brackets one here and one here, so you can get into the stud on this side, and then you can just put wall anchors into this wall since there is no stud right here. And we'll go into that. We'll do that for an option so you can see both ways to do it. Another thing worth noting is brackets usually have a short end and a long end. You can see this one is the same one, but it has a long end and a short end. So most people will want the long end on top, but just be aware of that. That way you don't have two separate lengths and it looks all goofy on you. Okay, so I found my stud, and I know that I want the bottom of my shelf 16 inches from the floor. So that's going to rest on top of this, needs to be at 16 inches. So what I'll do is I'll just measure 16 inches from the floor. Make my mark. Now I'll take my shelf here and put it right to the top of where I want it and mark my hole. So now I've marked where my bracket needs to be and where this hole is going to go. So now I need to screw my bracket into the wall. And as a rule of thumb, you want about 1 inch of your screw, at least, into the stud. But on the outside of the stud is 5/8 of sheetrock on it. So you need to account for the 1 inch plus 5/8 plus your bracket width. So I have about a 1 5/8 screw, and I'm just going to screw it to the wall. One note about screws, you could see one has more of a beveled head and one has more of a flat head. You'll definitely want to use this for an application like today so that it butts up right with the bracket, whereas this one here will look a little wonky sticking out. So another thing is this has coarse wood. This is a wood screw, and this is more for metal. So you would want this head ideally with this threads, these threads right here. So now that my top screw is in, I need to get the bottom level before I screw the next screw in. So how I do that is you just put this on the side, and then you just move the bubble to where it's level. And that is this bubble right here. You can see that is what you want. Now I'm able to screw my screw in. So now that I have this bracket hung, I need to know how far I want this bracket. This is 48 inches, and I want it to come in each bracket 3 inches. So this to this needs to be 42 inches. We're not worried about hitting a stud over here. There is no stud. So we can just measure 42 inches from the center of this to the center of this one. The center of this one is about 1/2 inch in, so I'm actually going to add that onto the other side. I'm going to go 42.5 inches. And that should be my 42 inches. So now that we know the distance, we need to know the height. So for that, I'm just going to put this on. I'm going to put my level on until it's perfectly level, and then I'm going to mark underneath it. And we don't need to worry about that line because it'll be covered by the shelf. So now that I have the bottom of my shelf and I've got my mark right here where it needs to be lined up, I can make a mark, and that's where my wall anchor, drywall anchor, needs to be. One of the reasons I love these drywall anchors, they're extremely tough. They are a fibered enforced nylon, and they have their own self-tapping drill bit on the end, so I don't need to go get a drill and a drill bit. I just put this on my screw gun and you just drill right in. So now the drywall anchor is screwed in flush to the wall. It's time to put our bracket on. To do that, we just need to use the screw that came with our included anchor kit. Nice and snug. You can see why I prefer the drill. So now, same thing, we need to get our level this way. And then we'll push this out of the way. We have our mark. Now it's time for another anchor. And this time I'll show you how to do it with just a screwdriver. You push a lot of pressure in and then you just screw. Good. Now that it's flush, we'll put this back and then we'll use the bolt that came with it. Or excuse me, the screw. It's time to put this on and check for level. That's good. So now it's time to screw from the bottom up to secure this onto the bracket. And what I like using is I've got this handy kit from Jackson Palmer that's got every shape of screw and size relatively. So you want a screw that's long enough so that when it stops at your bracket, it doesn't poke through here. And so this one looks pretty good. It's about 1/8 of an inch from the top, so it shouldn't poke through at all. You don't really need a ton of holding power, so I'd err on the side of being too short than too long.
GoPro number 2.
Now the shelf is done. the shelves level, and we are ready to clean up our mess and pick up our tools, and we're out of here.